Yappy here. I'm so mad right now. I am just so mad because I read this Athletic article on Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith. ESPN's First Take. Skip and Stephen A. embraced debate, played the hits, and changed TV. Yeah, that's all well and good, but this article was concretizing and enacting racist tropes. It's just, I am so mad right now. All right, so this article says that Skip Bayless wakes at dawn to run for an hour and memorizes a daily packet of notes to prepare for debates. Right, typical white, stereotypical, attitudes that you should prepare for debates and you should have like facts and logic. Man, I mean, this is just enacting whiteness. Then the other, his co-host Stephen A. Smith was a magnetic former newsman who hated jogging, spent his nights in noisy arenas, and sometimes rolled into the pre-dawn show with minutes to spare. So this is so racist, it's claiming that the black guy doesn't do the homework, doesn't do the hard work, but the white guy is somehow meticulous and a better teammate, but the black guy is more colorful, has got, the more magnetic personality. It's so concerning, these kind of racist tropes. The duo of Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith, the TV equivalent of baking soda and vinegar, lasted fewer than 4 years, yet it changed the face of ESPN, the most powerful entity in sports media. It led to a host of imitators, inspired countless arguments about the role of TV and cable news itself. There was a big laudatory article about Skip Bayless's Fox show, is it Undefeated? In New York Times op-ed talked about, what a great example of men talking to each other. So ESPN ABC studied their morning show very carefully, and they found out that in virtually every instance, whenever a spike in a ratings occurred, there was one reason: Skip Bayless. All right, the white guy. All right, this is so racist. All right, they're saying that the white guy, reason Skip Bayless, was responsible for every spike in ratings. I mean, think about all the black labor that made this white guy, his success possible. Do you think he could have done that alone if there weren't black people building bridges, there weren't black people building planes, there weren't black people building highways, there weren't black people who 200 years ago were forced to pick cotton and work as slaves? Like, you think any of Skip Bayless's success would have been possible without the fair dinkum labor of black people? And yet this bloody Athletic article is just so racist. Man, this is upsetting. And that more racist stereotypes here. Skip Bayless was the kind of guy who bought a Camaro for the horsepower, but said he only accelerated to the speed limit. So here's the white guy. He's presented as being law-abiding. He's presented as being pro-social. He's presented as taking into consideration the effect of his actions on other people. I mean, this is just white supremacism. I mean, what kind of person buys a Camaro for the horsepower but only accelerates to the speed limit? Right? People who think they possess white bodies. That's who. Right? People who insist on enacting whiteness. Skip is a church mouse. That's his personality. So law-abiding, upstanding, moral bloke, right? The white guy. That's how he's presented. Man, so racist. There's not a single person that prepares more for their job than Skip Bayless, says the longtime First Take producer. Again, more racism, saying that the white guy is more dedicated, more meticulous, does more work, is more pro-social, more of a team player. Says that Skip Bayless formed arguments that force people, whether out of agreement or anger, to react. So there's a Skip Bayless who thinks he inhabits a white body, getting out there, enacting whiteness, and forcing everyone else to respond to his arguments just because they're framed in such a compelling, coherent, logically and emotionally demanding manner. But just because Skip Bayless is so good at his job, right? He's going to get the credit here. Just because the ratings always spike when Skip Bayless is on. Man, you didn't know that sports journalists could be gurus? Wow, do I have a show for you, mate. The show needed to center on Skip Bayless. Yeah, the white guy. No one in the focus groups ever talked about Skip Bayless's debate partners on the show. Again, just totally devaluing the work of black people. When the numbers revealed around 50% of the First Take audience was black. and they are tuning in to check out, right, Skip Bayless, the white guy who prepares, who does his homework, who obeys the law, who's like tries to be a moral and upstanding citizen. Doesn't that just make you sick? So Skip Bayless has been a professional journalist for 40 years. He was profiled in the Washington Post back in 2013. He knows how to write profiles. One night, he thought about what makes Skip Bayless an interesting subject for a profile. He scribbled down 9 bullet points. And here they are. Number 1, the number 1 thing you should know about me, I've always tried to put God first in my life. I've often failed because I'm too proud and stubborn. When I was a little kid going to a Methodist church, I envisioned one day I would become a minister, but I never pursued that. Now, if I have any regret, if I wasn't doing this job, I would be an orthopedic surgeon because I like to help people. I mean, look, just showing the white guy working hard, wanting to help people, being a moral, upstanding citizen, not trying to come across as pious because I'm not. It's bigger than most people know about me. Yeah, that seems pretty fair dinkum true about Skip Bayless. And I'm presenting and decoding Skip Bayless precisely because he's not a guru, all right? Skip Bayless does not pretend to have a galaxy brain. He speaks in a very plain, direct, easy to understand manner about topics that he knows something about, or at least he understands the emotional quality of the topics that he knows something about. I mean, Mark Cuban took him down trying to show that Skip Bayless didn't know what his own defense was. So let's see if we can find that. Mark Cuban destroys Skip Bayless. Man.
What's your? You may have more than one issue, but what's your biggest issue with Skip?
It's not just Skip. It's sports writers, sports media in general, where everything's generalities, right? Excruciating pressure. What the hell is that, right? You know,
it was excruciating pressure. That's what it was.
Is that meaning what, Skip?
Meaning that you personally watched up close and personal what LeBron went through last year against your Dallas Mavericks. Was it not the biggest collapse of a superstar?
Okay, this is from 2011, June 22nd, 2012.
That we've ever witnessed on a finals or championship stage?
No, I mean, first of all, it's a team game. Right, you guys like to talk in complete generalities where no one can question you, right? You don't ever use facts. You don't ever use substance. You don't ever use
facts.
No.
That's all I use on this show.
What, excruciating pressure, undeniable this, you know, it's just all generalities.
There's never been a star under more pressure going into a finals, a championship series or game than LeBron James was under after 9 years and 3 league MVPs.
Well, first of all, you have the presumption that people care what you say. They don't. That when the guys go out there, when guys go out there, no, I'm talking about media in general. When guys get ready to play and they're in the locker room, they're not thinking, okay, well, what's written, what's going to be written, what's being said, right? I mean, they're getting prepared. And if you've got a good coach and you've got a good culture, then guys are ready to play no matter what. Like you guys were just talking about, you know, Miami wanted it more or less. Like that is just such horse, you know what, right? There's no such thing as it's not that Oklahoma City don't want it more. I think Miami was better prepared to play the game than Oklahoma City in terms of adjustments and changes. Now, if you want to talk about double teams and how they were used, whether or not they should have played zone, what defensive structure was in place, that's a valid conversation. But just saying they wanted it more, that's ridiculous.
Okay.
When you're Kevin Durant and you're Derek Fisher and you're Russell Westbrook, etc., and you're at that closeout game, there's nobody that wants it more. It's just a question of who executes better, and then you decide why.
Who played harder in the last games? Miami.
I think, well, I'm a huge Skip Bayless fan, but I think Mark Cuban is making great points. Making great points there. So I was up at 3 a.m. reading a book, Beer, Babes, and Balls, Masculinity and Sports Talk Radio. This book came out in 2007. It's by a practicing psychotherapist, a feminist, someone very much pro-gay. Says, I view masculinity as a social construction that assumes different forms in different historical moments and contexts. Yeah, I think that's true, but it also has an enormous genetic component, right? Men are genetically more aggressive and assertive than women. Men are more naturally inclined towards hierarchy, towards developing legal systems. Okay, more from the book. Men can pay a cost in the form of poor health, shallow and narrow relationships for conformity with the narrow definitions of masculinity that promise to bring them status and privilege. Yeah, they can also pay an enormous price for way too broad definitions of masculinity, like way too many possibilities, right? I talked in an earlier stream this morning about healthy masculinity. So it should mean a substantial period of your time, of your spare time, should be spent just with blokes or with your family, right? Because men are genetically wired to try to have sex with as many women as possible. We need a civilization that disciplines male sexuality and male violence, so discouraging gratuitous violence and discouraging gratuitous sex. So give men a family to saddle them down with obligations, put the male sexual genie in the heterosexual marital bottle, as Dennis Prager puts it, and give men only spaces, right? That's going to be healthier for them, so that they don't just wantonly spill their seed everywhere. A Martian arriving on planet Earth, not knowing what masculinity was, would quickly form the opinion that it is highly damaging and damaged, with very few, if redeeming, features. Yeah, I severely doubt that, right? Everything constructed in our society, every building, every transportation system, almost all major systems of thought, almost all cutting-edge developments in technology were accomplished by men. So, yeah, we've had a social element in constructing masculinity. That's true. You had the late 19th century American male image was a rugged individualist who, to escape civilizing constraints, went to work in exclusively male preserves, went to war with other men, went west to find a fortune, pitted his will against the perils of nature. Yeah, that's one expression of masculinity. As the U.S. became increasingly urban and mobile, those masculine options were no longer available. Men were forced to look elsewhere to reclaim their lost identities, and one of the ways that they reclaim their lost identities now is by tuning into sports talk radio. It's virtually an all-blokes medium, right? So when you're under assault by feminism, by the left, by the decrease in freedom of association, the substantial reduction in private property, in ever-encroaching government civil rights industrial complex, litigating and investigating more and more of life, you're looking for a safe space, right? So where can blokes go to just be with blokes, right? What are some spaces where you can actively exclude women, exclude people who aren't like you, right? So let's be honest, the major sports are overwhelmingly conducted by heterosexuals and are funded and attractive to heterosexuals. So sports talk radio is not usually a super gay place. Now, this book says mediated sports texts reproduce the idea that traditional masculinity and heterosexuality are natural and universal rather than socially constructed. Well, I would say that the genetic component here is larger. I just don't think that, on average, gay men are as excited about sports and participate in sports as intensely, particularly violent sports, as heterosexual men, and I don't think that is 100% socially constructed. Sports talk is one of the only remaining spaces where men of all social classes and all ethnic groups can directly discuss such values as discipline, skill, courage, competition, loyalty, fairness, teamwork, hierarchy, and achievement. So sports and sports fandom and sports talk radio are sites of male bonding, one of the few such places left in our society, right? And sports talk is a form of civic discourse that teaches us how to create healthy community for people who frequently lead isolated, lonely lives. There's a major sporting event, the most socially inept person can get out there and socialize, go to a bar, and form a common cause and form bonds with other people. So in 2001, an addict of sports talk, Alan Eisenstock, wrote a book called Sports Talk, a Masculinist Celebration of the Significance of Sports Radio. He referred to sports talk shows as a non-stop fraternity party, a sports bar on the radio, in which men can interact with other men free from the censure of feminism and political correctness. So sports talk radio is basically a dominantly heterosexual, male-only space reminiscent of the rise of fraternities and the Boy Scouts around the turn of the 20th century. Talk radio taps into a sense of public life, right? It's some way of connecting our individual life with a wider community. It reduces anxiety by encouraging forms of identification, right? It helps us overcome the isolation and exhaustion that comes from overworking. It fills in the increasing gap people feel between themselves, politicians, and our leading institutions. It's a novel, brash, and aggressive way of creating a group identity in neoliberal America. In talk radio and the American dream, we get 700 hours of talk radio. We find callers deeply worried about emasculation. So the natural order of things has been reversed with the civil rights industrial complex So that crime, blacks, rich corporations, and women all seem to have the upper hand. Talk radio becomes a battleground in which to reclaim hegemonic masculinity and rid at least this space of soft-spoken New Age guys. Now, even though the callers lack the power to ward off the verbal put-downs of the host, they keep coming back for more. Sports talk radio, even more than political talk radio, is about the only arena left for white men who have been wounded by the assaults of all our major institutions, wounded by the indignities of feminism, affirmative action, the civil rights industrial complex, and all these other minority groups, increasing rights, which comes at the stability and cohesion and social trust of the majority. So sports talk shows are a venue for the embattled white male seeking a recreation, seeking an identity, seeking a community. So one Atlanta sports station says, "The Fan, we make no pretensions what we're doing here. This is a guys radio station. We are aiming at the men's bracket, which is the hardest to reach." The author says people in sports talk radio are wary of academics. They believe that scholars read too much into the messages in the media. They think that what they do is normal and ordinary. They take for granted what they do and say at work. And the author of this book says he was driving on the freeway. He noticed a billboard that said, "Armstrong and Getty, listen to them before we fire them." That is a great billboard. Right? So Armstrong and Getty continue to be syndicated local Sacramento talk show hosts, have a popular following. They frequently mention on their show their fear of being fired, or saying something offensive, or defying their station manager. And so this billboard is reflective of the volatility of the radio industry. So everyone gets fired in radio. I remember some joke I heard when I worked in radio about a man confesses, "Look, my mother's a kleptomaniac, my dad's a murderer, my younger brother's a homosexual, all my cousins are in prison. How do I tell my girlfriend that I work in radio?" Yeah, tremendous job at turnover in radio. Incredibly intense, right? Here's a good quote. "We're all just renting our time in radio. Our jobs are never safe. Ratings are a constant source of tension. You can never stop thinking about it." And the business of talk radio is to sell you stuff, all right? So you can call advertising a necessary evil, but in the final analysis, when you look at sports talk radio as a business, it's all about selling goods and services. So the advertisers are our number one priority, says one station manager. Without them, we can't give our listeners the sports stuff they want. But it is hard to always be pushing new products like the latest gadget or male enhancement pills. I got into this business because I love sports and call in programming, not to push products. And many sports talk stations are just publicity machines for particular teams. So in Sacramento, KHTK, the sports talk station, has a contract with the NBA Sacramento Kings where their game. The KHTK sports talk hosts are employed by the Sacramento Kings to do play-by-play, pregame, and postgame commentary. So the KHTK hosts essentially operate as cogs in an expansive promotional and media machine that mixes Kings announcers, players, media outlets, and advertisers, all to capitalize and profit from the success of the only big-name sports team in town. You're not supposed to badmouth the people in the sports franchise who pay you. You have to kiss ass to the advertisers, the Kings, the corporate sponsors, all the time. There's very little journalistic freedom. All right, let's get back here. Mark Cuban ripping Skip Bayless.
He did every game. LeBron played harder than Kevin Durant did 4 straight games.
That is the most ridiculous thing any sports writer has ever said. Now, if you think when Kevin Durant walked off the court, he thought, yeah, I didn't play quite hard enough, right? Now, you can say like he wasn't put in a position to succeed. You could say that they didn't run the right plays. They didn't get the ball to him on the block enough. And if you were smart, you'd come out and you'd have substance. You say, you know what? This is how many plays they ran to him on the block. Here's how Miami defended it. Now, you can also argue that the Pat Riley way is always the same way all the time. Miami played it the same way all the time, and then we can have a discussion about adjustments. Like last year, did we play harder than the Heat? Is that what you think it was?
No, I don't. I think LeBron disappeared and shrank in crunch time of the fourth quarter, and I can just show you the numbers of what he didn't do in every fourth quarter.
So we get no credit for not putting him in a position to succeed, right? We played the Heat.
He put himself in. All he did was stand out on the perimeter.
Now, how do you think we defended that? Why do you think he was standing out there?
You didn't have to defend it.
Oh, right. So no matter what we did, he was just going to stand there and do nothing.
Well,
And is 40 saying that sports talk radio is healthier than political talk radio? No, but it is more masculine. I I frankly don't listen to much sports talk radio, almost nothing. I don't know how sports journalists can be gurus. I guess my point is to contrast him with gurus, because for all his flaws and lack of understanding and lack of command of facts, right, he is not claiming a galaxy brain. He's not claiming revolutionary theories. He's not some out-of-control narcissist. He's not pushing victimization and, woe is me and my true social prestige has been denied me. He kind of conducts himself the opposite of a guru. Whoops. Let me play more here from Mark Cuban. And
that's all I saw. That was a lot of it.
That's exactly right, Chip.
And hope
that's
that
all
Dwayne
you
Wade
saw.
Saved the day for him.
You're exactly right. That's all you saw. You didn't look, right? I mean, and that's a complete insult to us to say, you know what, the adjustments that we made.
What did you do to force him out there?
We had like 6, 7 different types of matchups in our zone, right? And we played man-to-man, and we had a variety of different switches, right? So we knew that 90% of his shots were going to come from the left-hand side, right? We knew that if you gave him room from the left, he was going to drive. Now, we didn't have the athletes that Oklahoma City did, so we had to plan differently.
Sure.
So we need to make sure that we pushed him out away, and then we gave him different looks every time he had the ball, because just forcing him to make a decision, right, to think about what he had to do, taking the time to read. Are we in a zone? What type of zone we're in? How are we matching up? What type of rotations are we in? Making him think made them pass the ball around the perimeter, which gave us a chance to adjust, right? Now, they're smarter. They're a better team this year. They deserve to win this year. But, that's the way we played it. And so it wasn't just LeBron. LeBron actually played it right more often than not. He made the right pass to the right guy who didn't make the right play. And that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to get the ball out of their hands and into the hands of somebody else who we wanted him to play Michael Jordan and make somebody play Steve Kerr. Now, last night, Mike Miller.
They had several Steve Kerrs.
Okay, back to this academic book on Sports Talk Radio. It talks about the tension between journalistic independence and the necessity to maximize advertising revenues. Most of the products advertised on sports radio, automobiles, beer, gadgets, male enhancement pills, are reflective of the laddish masculinity. Sports station ads such as Sports Talk Radio, it's just beer, babes, and brats, gives the impression the staff are not really working. It's just one big frat party. Yet everyone I interviewed talked about long hours, fatigue, and work stress. So how do we get these discourses of hedonism in the face of increased corporate pressures and work strain? Perhaps the emphasis on pleasure seeking is assembled to mask increasingly bureaucratic and irrational features of the modern workplace. Stories of sports radio as one big laddish celebration obscure the fact the sports radio staff are all involved in rational bureaucratic work organizations, feature of many men's work experience in today's hyper-capitalist culture. And this type of bureaucracy are almost always feature HR departments run by left-wing women, and normal male behavior is an anathema in the modern bureaucratized corporate culture. Back to Mark Cuban.
They had everybody stepping up, and they deserved every bit. But okay, you're talking generalities, and just to say, yeah, you are.
Okay, you spewed out some generality about the players don't care. Okay, let me tell you that for a fact, and Stephen A. can validate this, LeBron James listened to what I said for about, 8 years? Because that's all I heard. He said I was his Howard Cosell. And this year, for the first time, to his credit, he tuned out all the noise. That's all we saw in the finals was he's reading the Hunger Games trilogy before the games. He's meditating on the bench before the games. He tuned us out.
This is a Skip Bayless special. LeBron lost last year because he wasn't paying attention to Skip Bayless. LeBron won this year because he wasn't. That's what you just said.
Okay.
Did he not just say that?
Okay. Here's what he didn't do. Here's what he didn't do against you guys.
Okay.
He let you off the hook because he didn't do what we saw him do for 4 straight games. He didn't drive through your zone and slash it up and dish. He didn't post.
Okay, some pretty good stuff there from Mark Cuban. All right, looking at this Northwestern website. Skip Bayless, how is sports media's most hated man so popular? And it says 5 steps to a Skip Bayless hot take. 1, moderator asks provocative question. Audience knows will get Skip riled up. So when I interviewed Lowell Cohn, who's got a PhD in English, very, very smart man, said Skip Bayless is better than anyone he knows, putting his finger on the pulse of what's going on with sports fans. So example is LeBron James, the best player of this generation. Debate opponent makes a rational point. Skip then reframes the question. LeBron may be the best player born on the last Sunday of the week in December, but is he better than Michael Jordan? Then Skip unleashes completely anecdotal argument that is impossible to prove is false. Then he gets thousands of retweets and comments calling him an idiot, rinses and repeats. Tomorrow on Undisputed, I'll explain to Shannon why Tim Tebow is the answer to the Patriots' QB problems. So what makes him so popular? Lots of columnists have hot takes. Lots of athletes have hot takes. Skip is eloquent. He's a strong TV personality. That is not enough. So to find out the answer, this author went on a 12-hour Skipathon content binge. So hour one, starting from his archives at the LA Times, it seems he's always had the clickbait gene. The first article had the title, "Is Rose Cheating on Him or Jill?" which is in reference to safeties getting a step on QBs without them noting. He describes a racehorse as a dark chocolate beauty. In ESPN Sports Nation chat from 2009, he explains the origin of his LeBron James hate. Dear LeBron, never ever seen a player with 0 rings heap more pressure on himself by acting more brazenly cocky about how he's going to win this championship. You dance during blowouts, you flex, you snap pictures before games. It's as if you're going to have the ring ceremony before Sunday's Game 1 versus the Pistons. You have now hit 1 walk-off jumper in 6 NBA seasons. Jordan did that every week, so now it's time to start showing us what you've got. No more excuses. Back it up and you will be king. And then there is a 2006 video that begins to explain how Skip Bayless became so popular. I've been reading him since about 1980, 81, 82. Okay, this is Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson will turn out to be nothing but fool's gold in the Rocky Mountains. You know this, and I know this, because all he wants to do is chuck it up. He's on his best behavior now. 13 assists, very impressive. George Carlson, mad scientist heaven, because he gets to show his coaching peers he can.
So for me, listening to Skip is like the good part of getting, into porn, right? It's just so exciting. It's not the icky after. But when you're initially tuning into porn and the colors seem more vivid and your blood's flowing and you feel stronger and you're getting revenge on all the women who have humiliated you and you're having like a soaring time after the drudgery of your day, that's kind of what it's like to get a little Skip Bayless.
Can win with 2 of these little guys in the backcourt in Boykins, but in the end, on January 22nd, when the other superstar comes back, all those assists will start turning into shots. And
Okay. So Allen Iverson can't get over some comments that Skip Bayless has made. Fast forward a few years, Skip repeatedly calls Chris Bosh Spice for playing soft with the Miami Heat. Chris Bosh is so annoyed he comes onto First Take. Like an adult, explain he takes pride in his family name and resorting to name-calling isn't real analysis. It's a cheap shot. Skip looks him in the eyes, takes a deep breath, goes on a tirade about how he's a soft player and he won't stop unless Bosh plays tougher. Bosh admits that Skip motivates him. So that's our first hint. Right? Skip is popular because he gets in feuds with pro athletes and they go on the show, like Richard Sherman did to confront him for his ridiculous claims. Doesn't stop with athletes. Mavericks owner Mark Cuban, wearing a Smurfs shirt, went on First Take and annihilated Skip, not knowing the basics of how his own defense work. So Skip is not a sports expert. Mark Cuban exposes that. His arguments are anecdotal and opinions based with cherry-picked stats. But wait, learn about double elevator screens, Horn's offensive set, and the intricacies of various offenses and defenses when you can argue about Jordan versus LeBron. So Skip fits into a particular landscape, right? YouTube commentator David Ferguson says, a lot of people can't stand Skip. I love the guy. He is the face and the voice for the not-so-public opinion. What a lot of people don't understand is that his job isn't to be likable. His job is to entertain. So the money in entertainment and talk radio's entertainment is in being interesting, not in being right. So Skip owns debate. He balls deep in an ice bath where a man half his age made us all laugh to take focus off the fact that the old man straight out took his man card and slapped him with it. Okay, Skip Bayless worked his way up from the average newspaper reporter to be one of the 3 faces of sports. He still has that 3 hours of sleep, run 2 miles at 2 a.m. work ethic. Guys much younger than him couldn't possibly compete with. Skip's one of those guys that is so hated when his time on earth is up, people will appreciate him in his absence. Without him, Shannon and Stephen A. and these sports shows would be as entertaining as the Today Show. So the line between love and hate is extremely thin. And Skip Bayless has tremendous entertainment value. His Twitter bio says, maybe not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Okay, so let's get some context comparing him with secular gurus. This is from the academic podcast, Decoding the Gurus.
It appeals to the conspiratorial mindset too. There's literature on this where, you know, it's a way for them to feel special and to feel better about their own lives.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the tendency to encourage cultish dynamics, and this is not just a pejorative. When we are referencing this, we're talking about the fact that the gurus often establish these very strong binary in-group and out-group categories, right? And usually it's their followers and supporters are the good, moral, wise people, and their out-group are malicious, bad-faith critics who just want to tear everyone down. So this serves as, along with a host of other behavioral patterns, to emotionally manipulate followers in order to.
So I don't think, you know, Skip is trying to establish parasocial relationship with his followers, but he is, I guess, mostly manipulating people with just very honed performances that are just high octane and kind of exciting and compelling to view. And I saw Skip on Beverly Drive on Monday, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't go up to him and tell him about the time I ran into Tom Landry when I was covering the 49ers and the Cowboys. And when I walked up to Tom Landry, the first time I've seen him in person, Tom Landry was talking about how he hadn't talked to Skip Bayless in several years and this and that about Skip Bayless. So 1985, December 22nd, 1985, first time I meet Tom Landry, he's talking about Skip Bayless. And Skip says God's his number one priority in life. So what does that actually mean? Like, what does Skip sacrifice for God? Like, what does he not do because God's his number one priority, right? How does making God his number one priority, how does that manifest in his life? I'd be curious.
Get them to protect the guru, or sometimes to launch attacks at people that might be criticizing the guru. But in many respects, it's things like parasocial relationships are kind of unavoidable when consuming someone's content, or, you know, with the internet the way it is. But there are people that cultivate and make use of those relationships to a greater and lesser extent. And gurus really strongly cultivate them by using like excessive flattery, often referencing like how their followers are like close friends to them and this kind of thing. And then similarly presenting themselves as wounded and vulnerable and in need of protection. It's kind of an interesting.
And Skip Bayless doesn't do that.
Interesting paradox, because you have them as the all-conquering polymathic genius, but they're also, you know, in need of protection and constantly under attack. And the guru figure who does this most often recently, Jordan Peterson used to be the master of it, but I would point out Lex Friedman as somebody who's engaged in it. And I just have a reference. It's not the one that he did today, but he said, he posted this on his Reddit. I'll have several difficult conversations this year and next. I'll get attacked from all sides. I now understand that this is the way for anyone who seeks to empathize and understand in a divided world. I hope you.
So anyone who works as hard as Skip Bayless does, anyone almost who is so driven to command an audience, right? They're people like me, people like Skip, who's obviously far more successful than me. We're obviously coming from a broken place. Skip Bayless says, both my parents were alcoholics. I come from a broken home. My mother forced me to take speech lessons from age 8 to 12, and turned out to be great for him. And he talks about his job. It's not a job, it's my life. It's his highest priority, right? I still leap out of bed every day to do my job. I wear on people because of my strength. My weakness is my intensity. I bring it every day. I bring every last ounce that I have. Alcohol was rampant through my whole extended family. Then Skip was influenced by his high school journalism teacher, Elizabeth Burdett. She made Skip feel like Hemingway. He's always had a passion for books, movies, theater, and several cable TV series rival his passion for sports. Nothing gives him more satisfaction than writing something that he likes. He loves fast cars, but he doesn't drive them above the speed limit.
You know my heart and will still support me. I'll need it.
Yeah, it's funny you cited him, because I was about to mention Lex, because he was on my mind too. I mean, people often cite Lex as that he's just all about love, and he's just trying to increase the amount of love and understanding in the world. But he also, like, ruthlessly cuts off communication with anyone who is not expressing 100% love back at him.
Unless they're famous.
Of course, yeah.
So he, you know, Destiny or those kind of people, he'll tolerate a level of disagreement, but if they're not a figure with a high enough profile,
no,
gone.
If they're a normal person on Reddit, they're gone. So yeah, I mean, people cite Lex's kind of kumbaya, love is the answer thing as an example of how he's really a good guy and not all that bad. But to be honest, I've always seen these elements of cultishness in it. It's particularly in Lex's case, it's particularly clumsy. It's not even particularly.
It's at the surface, but it's very effective. Like, you know, for the amount of people that kind of criticize Lex and kind of see through it, just look at the comments that he hasn't blocked. It's loads of people saying, we love you, Lex. We know that you're what's in your heart. We need people like you in the world, and so on. And like the thing which he tweeted out today said, I will speak with everyone and I will get attacked, derided, and slandered for it. But I believe in the power of long-form, empathetic conversation to help discover our common humanity, including the good and the evil we are all capable of. I know I'm underqualified and underskilled for these conversations, so I'll often fall short, as I do in all aspects of my life, but I'll work hard to improve and will never, ever give in to cynicism. Right? And it's a beautiful encapsulation, but this is in reference to Lex conducting fawning interviews with no pushback with Benjamin Netanyahu most recently, and a host of controversial figures where he gives very mild pushback, or I think his strongest is probably with Kanye West, who was spouting overt anti-Semitism. But even in that conversation, the main thing that Lex focused on was when Kanye said he didn't trust Lex. That's the thing which he found most hurtful and returned to at the end of the conversation. So it's that wounded bird pose of, I'm doing good and I'm going to be attacked like Jesus. It almost sounds like Jesus, and there's no mention of accurate criticism, right? The bit at the end, you might say that, well, he's admitting he's at fault, but notice that he didn't at the beginning say, you know, I'll be legitimately critiqued for making mistakes or being too soft. No, he said, I'll be attacked, derided, and slandered. So yeah. Okay,
that's good.
That's cultish dynamics, encouraging them.
Okay, well, we haven't done pseudo profound bullshit. One of my favorite domains of the Gurometry, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't have my notes here. What have you got?
Well, so this is usually paired with a tendency to make use of neologisms, not always.
Okay, neologism, like coining, you know, fancy acronyms. So, what's a guru from the perspective of decoding the gurus? All right, someone who produces something that sounds profound but isn't. Right? Skip Bayless is not pushing, you know, pseudo profundity. Right? Just very plain spoken, fair dinkum bloke. Galaxy brainness, people who present ideas that are just too profound for the average mind to comprehend. Right? That's not Skip Bayless. He's not, you know, claiming galaxy brainness. Cultishness, right? Where people who like me are good people and people who don't like me are bad people. Skip Bayless doesn't do that. He's not building a cult. He has no interest in building a cult. Anti-establishment. The orthodoxy, the establishment, the mainstream media, the expert consensus are always wrong. Maybe a tiny little bit of, or a mild amount of this. So maybe a 2 out of 5 in this area for Skip. Grievance mongering, pretty mild. Feeling excluded and disregarded and disrespected. Narratives of grievance, very mild with Skip Bayless. Self-aggrandizement and narcissism. It's impossible to do a job like Skip Bayless does without having a sense of grandiosity and an inflated idea of one's self-importance, but he seems to be quite functional. Cassandra complex, the gurus love to talk about how the end of the world is at hand. Skip does not do this. Revolutionary theories, he doesn't claim to have revolutionary theories. Pseudo-profound BS, right? I don't think Skip does this either.
But, you know, inventing your own terminology is something that gurus like to do. And pseudo-profound bullshit is, it sounds pejorative, which it is, but it is also a term from the psychology literature, and it refers to...
Yes, this is Chris Cavanaugh. He's a professor at Oxford University. He lives in Japan. He is Irish, and his co-host in the Decoding the Gurus podcast is Matthew Brown. He's at the University of Central Queensland. He's a fair dinkum Australian psychologist. So Christopher Cavanaugh is an anthropologist. Matt Brown, his co-host, is a psychologist. So Chris has his gain turned out much higher than Matt Brown.
Language that appears profound, but once you kind of like consider it critically, it's saying something very mundane or something which looks deep but is actually quite shallow. And I think that an aspect of it can be where you're referencing technical terminology that sounds very complicated. You're making reference to these abstract or obscure theories, often referencing the particular names which most people wouldn't know of the relevant theorists as well. But you're not doing so actually to kind of explain the theory and elucidate some point that you really need to reference the theory. No, the reason for signaling it or for referencing it is to reflect back on how much you know and how great your technical expertise is. That it's almost hard for you to sink down to a normal level to communicate with people because you're just bustling with so many high-level concepts, right? Did I miss anything with that, Matt? What else would you put in the pseudo-profound bucket? And you better unmute yourself, or it'll just be silence.
I think that's right. Look, it's different from the other domains we talked about because pseudo-profound bullshit is really about the sort of the language, like the sort of syntactic structure. As you said, the buzzwords, the jargon that people are using, and stringing together words and sentences that give the appearance of saying something profound and meaningful, but actually are not really saying anything much at all. An example could
And Skip Bayless does not do this at all.
Be, as beings of light, we are local and non-local, time-bound and timeless actuality and possibility. I mean, that sounds kind of okay if you don't analyze it carefully, but if you think about it, it doesn't really mean anything. Deepak Chopra is the ultimate coiner of pseudo-profound bullshit. He said things like imagination is inside exponential space-time events. Noticing he's referencing some sort of physics-type stuff there, but he's connecting it to imagination. It makes no sense. So, yeah, I mean, what else to say about pseudo-profound?
I'd highlight that, like, although the term originally is kind of associated with Deepak Chopra and the kind of quantum woo proponents, and you do find that amongst the secular gurus on occasion. I think their variety is a little bit different because it will often be referencing like evolutionary theorists or psychologists, or it can also be seen in just the way that they respond to certain ideas. Like I have a transcript in front of me where it says Jordan Peterson was talking to Brett Weinstein about the possibility that hospitals are net negative, like they harm more people than they can heal because of things like superbugs and medical mistreatments and so on. And Jordan says, "No, that's just a guess, and it could easily be wrong, but it also could not be wrong." And Brett Weinstein takes a pause, then says, "The fact that it's even plausible is a stunning fact." And then they ramble on. Now, that to me is kind of taking the language of recognizing profundity, but what you've just issued for is uninformed bullshit. But if somebody reacts as if it's a deep profundity, it creates the impression that something important was being transmitted. And the sense makers are often extremely guilty of this.
Yeah, the sense makers. Yeah, just go listen to the sense making episode. You'll hear so many examples of it. I for a bit of fun once, Chris, I asked GPT-4 to look at a few of Eric Weinstein's tweets and tell me whether or not they were pseudo-profound bullshit or not. And well, he could say whether it was right or wrong, but it had the same assessment that I did on every one of them. One of the tweets I gave it was this one. Eric Weinstein tweeted, "When you first realized that in the summer of '69, Bryan Adams was not yet 10 years old, you were supposed to extrapolate that the world pretty routinely speaks in coded messages."
Wow.
Like, just mull over that for a little while and see whether or not you think that's bullshit.
I'd also add to it, Matt, that part of the reason that the gurus are so competent in this area is that they tend to have very high levels of verbal fluency. They're able to speak in an autodidactic kind of way, just stream of consciousness, often without the usual verbal tics that inhabit normal mortal speech. And that content is liberally peppered with, obscure references, technical jargon, and so on. But it's their fluency and often their use of metaphor or metaphorical language that also marks them out. And
So early this morning, I read another book called Yappy Days Behind the Scenes with Newsers, Schmoozers, Boozers, and Losers. It's a book by talk radio producer Bernadette Duncan. She's married to the wife of Talkers magazine publisher and editor Michael Harrison. And she discusses what makes some people, on air big-time celebrities. And it's being indispensable, right? For advertisers, for an audience, right? The sense that the performer is indispensable, that people have to listen to him, have to get his hot take. And 9/11 was an interesting day because Howard Stern was on the air when the Twin Towers were hit, and his producer said something listeners would never hear on news stations anywhere else on radio shortly after the attack. He said, "It's a terrorist attack, isn't it?" So the Howard Stern crew connected the dots, moved the story forward, basically 100% correctly. Now, the news reporters up and down the dial were straitjacketed, mostly repeating and repeating only that which they knew could be verified. And one of Howard Stern's cohorts asked him, "Why doesn't the news just call it like it is?" And Gary, the producer, piped up, "Well, they're a legitimate news organization. They're not allowed to say what we are thinking." So that's a big difference between talk radio and the news. Right? People who are doing the news are not supposed to say what they're thinking. People in talk radio get to say what they're thinking, and sometimes what people are thinking is more true than the news. So talk radio is a place where people can discuss the messy and ugly parts of life, speaking from a less tailored part of the brain. So radio people are notorious for poor spelling, unkempt hair, and wardrobe. And callers know they can anonymously say the sorts of stuff normally shared with a friend over the bathroom stall. She also worked for Lou Dobbs, and he says that he insisted on a script writer, and she was struck silent. Lou Dobbs wanted someone who'd write out his monologues, his transitions, and even his interview segments. A script writer for a radio talk show. Spontaneity is the very essence of talk radio. Spontaneity is the heart of the beauty of talk radio. If you script a talk radio show, you lose the genre. It becomes something else. Since when is a talk show scripted? Radio, the naked human voice, is the great exposer. You can't act your way into these thrills and revelry. It builds from within. It goes deeper than words. It brings out the things that make us human. You can't read your way through the thrill for winning home run. You must feel your way, or there's a disconnect. The same principle applies in talk radio for the natural flow of conversation.
We often see in the content that in lots of occasions, the gurus just replace argument with a metaphor. They just say, it's like, and they give a metaphor, and they describe the metaphor in great depth, but they haven't actually demonstrated that the argument is valid. They've just kind of talked about things in a metaphorical plane, and then they move on to the next topic. And that is, it's not exactly what the pseudo profound bullshit concept captures, but it's definitely in a related family.
I think I know what you mean, and I think it is helpful to have a bit of a broader, more inclusive sort of approach with this pseudo profound bullshit thing, because like you said, has got a lot to do with that facility with language. They are well-educated people, very loquacious, and there are, like, all of us use the form of language as kind of an indicator, as a kind of
it's not just functional.
Yeah, that's right. It's performative as well. And so, if you do things like, reference technical scientific terms, if you're mentioning equations, if you're using this kind of academic language, then all of that stuff is taking as signifiers that something meaningful is being said. Now, I'll give you another example of all of these things in another Eric Weinstein tweet quiz. This tweet said, 1, disinformation plus the plus symbol, informed consent equals disinformed consent. 2, malinformation leading to non-consent leads to malinformed refusal to consent. 3, malinformation and disinformation were defined by deviation from a state narrative based on questionable objective/science. Right, now that's a word salad on one level, but he is using what seems superficially to be very precise language. Right, he's using a form of expression which seems like it's like grounded in something. It's just, if you try to pass out what's been said, it either means very little, or he's just repeating standard conspiratorial.
Oh, right, yeah,
I was in a fancy way.
I was going to say that I can parse that, like I can follow that, because I'm very familiar with the issues that the conspiracy theorists have with those terms. And so
I can pass it too, Chris. But I think my point there is that it's saying something that's
straightforward,
quite straightforward in a very complicated way, in a way that I guess encourages people to think, well, this is profound. This is saying something true.
Yeah, and Skip Bayless doesn't play that game. Another part of the Gurometer, number 9, conspiracy mongering to gain real insights, real special knowledge that nobody else can see. That is very hard work. For normal people, even a lifetime of study and research only provides a few scant original intellectual contributions. That's not nearly enough for a guru. Guru needs a steady supply of fresh original content to supply to their followers and to justify their status. To be a guru, they must set themselves up not only as uniquely insightful, but above and apart from all orthodoxies, including established political and ideological groups. Thus, they are encouraged to go beyond standard heterodoxy, contrarianism, and skepticism into the realm of conspiratorial ideation. So I think Skip is only relatively mild to moderate in doing this. This is because the expert consensus, though naturally not infallible, but by definition tends to supply the most reasonable and evidence-based view based on current information. So the guru is in the position of needing to provide a strongly contrasting perspective to the expert consensus, and the only way to supply that is to have something that backs up your bold claims in a compelling way. This leads inexorably down the path of conspiracy mongering, right? Where you come to alternative views of events that authoritative sources cannot or won't tell you about. And conspiracy theories require a suppressive network to explain away the lack of evidence and support, and why nobody is willing to accept the guru's theories. So gurus have a dilemma, right? They will frequently turn to conspiracies and use very intricate reasoning, but they will tend to then disregard much simpler and more conventional alternative explanations.
Yeah, this is true, and I think that pseudo profundity maybe goes neatly, Matt, with the tendency for people to present themselves as possessing revolutionary theories. So this is another feature that we identify, and we've referenced it already, but the kind of claims to have created game-changing, paradigm-shifting theories and insights that have almost always not been recognized due to suppressive forces and conspiracies. And the figure that I think is most readily invoked here, as discussed earlier, is Galileo, a revolutionary thinker who was not recognized by the authorities, but was later vindicated. And that is the motif that most of the gurus have.
Yeah, particularly in dissident spheres, Galileo is just invoked again and again and again. Also with conventional centrists and liberals and leftists decrying religion. They're always going back to Galileo.
This is not always true. Not all of the secular gurus have their own revolutionary theories, but those that do tend to score more highly in other factors as well.
Yeah, and some obvious examples of that would be Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying with their evolutionary paradigm, which is subtly different from all the other evolutionary.
I think that's primarily Brett's lineage theory, and the telomeres, which he claimed, was his insight was the key for the Nobel Prize.
True. I'm also thinking of their book where they sort of they sketch out a alternative.
The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. Yeah.
Now Eric Weinstein, of course, has come up with geometric unity. That's an obvious revolutionary theory that has not yet been recognized.
Jordan Peterson has a couple every day for almost every topic that he mentions. And
it's not like Elon Musk, but he doesn't fit it perfectly, right? But he is someone who presents himself as basically single-handedly, figuring out, brain surgery, artificial intelligence, space flight, you name it. So he sort of claims engineering. What's this thing called again? It's not
rocketry.
No, what's the Gurometer thing called again? I've forgotten it. It's revolutionary theories.
Yeah.
He has revolutionary stuff that he creates. Yeah,
and I mean you can also see it in various other figures like Gadsad, right? The claims to have founded a whole bunch of the particular new fields in evolutionary thinking, evolutionary consumption.
Evolutionary consumption, that's right. Nassim Taleb has a special understanding of low probability statistics, non-normal distributions, which is basically much better than anything that exists in conventional statistics.
I think Ibram X. Kendi, although
so when you tune into Fox, you get ads for stool softener, right? Nothing like a good stool softener ad. Gentle, dependable, stimulant-free. Thank you for the stool softener, so you don't feel like a porcupine is coming out of you. All right, the average age of a Fox News viewer is like 70.
We might talk a little bit about the distinctions there, but the having your own bespoke kind of definition or applying a paradigm in a novel way, I think counts. And I would say that various ideas that Kendi has advanced potentially fall into the revolutionary theories area, though he often does situate it within an existing field, right? And if you listen to his talks, he's often claiming it isn't revolutionary. It's just an established theory that he's now expounding on to a popular audience. But in terms of his other outputs, he is broadly regarded as having been responsible for revolutionary theories, and I think he does lean into that. So that would be an example of someone not from the kind of IDW space.
Yep. Now, I think one of our final ones we haven't covered yet is the Cassandra complex. So this is the warning of an impending doom. And I think it's an important feature that, again, a bit like Galaxy Brain, this revolutionary theories. You don't see it in all gurus, but when you do see it, it tends to be not a very good sign. A little bit like cult software.
Bloody Matt Brown, he keeps moving away from the microphone. So I keep trying to balance his audio levels here.
And have a doomsday type scenario, the world is going to end shortly. You have to join the cult. You have to do these particular things to be one of the saved, or at least to be aware of what's going on. Conspiracy theories have a similar property. So Matt, this I feel is like the emotional hook that can be important for really getting the guru game on.
I've got a question for you. You referred to it as the Cassandra complex, but wasn't Cassandra vindicated in the end in the myth? So, yes. So is this a badly named? Why? What's going on here?
Yes. Well, perhaps, but the
no, it's not. I was trying to set you up. Complex, Cassandra complex.
Yes,
right?
yes.
People
Someone, but believing that you're Cassandra.
Yes, that's it.
And also Cassandra was someone who, you know, she was doomed to never be believed, right? To be able to see the future, right? To know about the terrible things that were happening, you know, to be trying to tell everyone, but not to be believed by most, right? Or maybe all. So I think it's helpful for understanding the gurus too, because that's kind of how they present it as well, right? That the mainstream, the institutions are blundering on towards certain doom. You know, listen to me. You know, I've got my finger on the pulse. I know what's going on, and this is what's broken. This is what's failing. Catastrophe is upon us unless we do X, right? What we do is often a little bit vague, but what you should definitely do is
join their Patreon.
Yeah, definitely join their Patreon. Listen to all of their podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. So believing that they have a superior ability to detect where the corrupt society is heading, and making claims that they have correctly predicted things and have like a long history of accurate predictions is, regardless of how accurate that claim is something that you see a lot related to this.
And the recent experience with COVID, the vaccines, all of that stuff, you saw many instances of Cassandra complex there. People claiming about how everyone had got it all wrong. Terrible things are afoot. Terrible things are going to happen. You know, the vaccines are going to have these side effects that could be killing us all in 10 or 20 years. You name it, right? There were so many doomsday Cassandra scenarios floating around there. And
this belief that, you know, the world is corrupted, I think it connects him with another feature which we haven't emphasized yet, but which I think is core to the whole concept that we're interested in, is the mongering of conspiracy mongering. And this can't be overstated, because it really does form something of a tight connection with the narcissism and the grievance mongering. And if you believe that the world is, you know, corrupted, and constantly invoke conspiracies, then, you know, by definition, you're kind of a conspiracy theorist and conspiracy prone. And essentially everything can be explained through conspiracies. Like, as with all conspiracy theorists, it isn't just that you're positing that there are things that are hidden in this world, there are things which governments lie about. It's rather that everything fits.
What's sad is that once people go down that conspiracy rabbit hole, right, it's rare that they come back out.
Into your explanatory framework. There's a kind of hyperactive pattern recognition and a circular and self-reinforcing logic, self-sealing logic that constantly, if there is, the mainstream gives evidence that lends even a little bit of credence to your idea, that vindicates you. If they deny it, that shows it, because they're repressing the truth. And if there is evidence missing or contradictory evidence, well, that's just showing how good the conspiracy is at concealing the truth. They would go that far.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the conspiracism is like the crazy glue that holds the whole mad box of spiders together. Because it neatly, as you said, makes it a self-sealing belief system. So, I've discovered.
That's a great line, that conspiracy theory is the crazy glue that holds the whole box of spiders together.
New truths about physics. Nobody seems to be recognizing that. I'm just telling you, well, that's because it's being suppressed as a conspiracy. I know that the vaccines are definitely going to be, causing, terrible harm, etc. The authorities aren't doing anything about it. The authorities are saying that it's fine. All of these people that are supposed scientists or experts in the field, well, that's because there's a conspiracy. They're all against us. They're criticizing us. They're saying that we're grifters and that we're bad people. Well, that's because they're trying to shut down the voices that are trying to point out the conspiracy. Like, it is the thing that makes it a self-sealing little intellectual bubble.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, I got lost somewhere when we went through what number were we on, which is why I kept referencing this characteristic and so on. But I'm certain now that the last number 10, is excessive profiteering.
Okay, this is Anthony Camilla talking about Opie's criticism of Camilla's book being.
I haven't confirmed this yet, but Kevin Brennan poked his head in yesterday and goes, Anthony, did you hear? I'm like, hear what? Yes, I don't know. Someone told me Opie said your book was lazy. And I'm like, oh, Erock is confirming this? And then I go, where'd you hear that? He goes, I don't know. I'm just spreading things. Fucking Brennan is hilarious. It's like, I guess that's how bullshit gets spread around. Someone just walks in and goes, they heard it. Brennan's genius, man. I love that motherfucker. So, did he say it was lazy, Erock? You know what's lazier than my book? Not writing a book. How about that? How about never having written a book? That's probably lazier. How about picking up shitty recording equipment and going to a bar and recording 4 hours and busting it up into a thrilling 2-parter? How lazy is that?
Wait a minute, is this the bit? What's lazier than you writing your book?
What's lazier than my book? Or Opie? Let's see. What's lazier than the person that didn't write a book that calls my book lazy. What did he say exactly? Did you hear it?
Yeah, it's like the last 20 minutes.
But I thought he didn't read my book and wasn't going to read it.
He didn't. He quoted, he has people that look out for him, and they gave him all the details. And I'm not elaborating or going off context here. He actually said he has people that look out for him that are giving him the information.
His guardian angels. People who look out for him. First of all, this is a lie. It's another one of the grand Greg Opie Hughes lies. He doesn't have these people that look after him. No one would. No one likes him. That's just the plain, honest truth. So he talks about these people, but never mentions who they are. Who's reading my book to report back to Opie what it's all about?
Well, I know one is his new producer. Mike the cop.
Oh, right, because he had to get a cop as a producer. Oh, no. Because he's not lazy.
Ooh, he's ripping me off.
Totally ripping you off, Keith. We invented cops as producers, Robin. What the fuck? So lazy. So some other guy told him it was lazy.
Yeah, his people that look out for him.
People that look out for them. Yeah. Are they literary experts or anything like that? Is it the Philly crew?
I don't know.
Maybe it's the Philly crew.
Is not reading the book lazier than writing the book?
I would assume not reading the book lazier than the writing of the book.
And having someone read you the book
having someone read you the book. Couldn't he just, if that's the case, couldn't he have just gotten the audio version? And wouldn't that be like the guy telling him? Only it's right from the horse's ass. Me. I don't get it. Lazy, right? No, Opie, you're lazy. You're fucking lazy. You always have been. He tried to make it look like he was motivated to do things. But what was that? Going out to lunch with the boss every so often so you could rat out everybody on the staff? Or fucking, and then run to that person and go, yeah, management's not too happy with you. And then when management would try to fire them, Opie would go back and go, nah, give him another chance. And then he'd go, I saved your job. No, you were the one that had me almost fired. Right, Erock? Right.
It was, as someone who's been in that environment, that morning show world, it was so fun to go be like, oh, we weren't the only show that was dysfunctional as fuck behind the scenes. Yeah. Like, you see it all play out, and it's just great behind the scenes. Look at that whole world. Oh,
yeah.
People just have this thought, like, oh, my God, I love listening to these guys. They're best friends. Like,
they hang
out all day together.
That's what Opie wanted. He wanted, like, me and him to hang out together all the time. He wanted phone calls and texts like a Mary. Like a fucking Mary.
What guy wants to talk to another guy on the phone?
I talked to you for 4 fucking hours. All right, I talked to Jimmy for 4 hours. You were in the room. But I'm supposed to text him? Ooh, you watching Melrose tonight?
Well, you got to be careful here.
Why?
Because this is what he says is part of the problem, is that you obsess over him and you don't stop talking about him.
Again, the last time I talked about the likes of Greg Opie Hughes was the last time he said something stupid about me. So, you know, it goes both ways. Had to have someone read the book and then report to him that my book is lazy.
He reiterated that point a couple of times.
That what?
That he has no interest in reading the book. He's not going to read the book. He had people who...
He wants it known that he never listens to this show. He didn't listen or watch any of the podcasts I did out in L.A., and he would never read my book. And he doesn't know that Chip Chipperson's show in Philly was a packed house at the Fillmore. And we stayed over an hour after the show to do signings and pictures with the fans. But he knows nothing of this. He has people that take care of him, that report back.
He complained about the forward, too, about Jimmy's forward, and saying that was bullshit because something in the forward about Jimmy talking about his mom calling in the early years of XM, saying, is something wrong? Are you and Opie not getting along together, whatever?
Yeah.
And Opie just said there's this whole thing that Jim doesn't give a fuck about his parents, and went into these details about how Jim won't go see his parents, and they have to squeeze in time when he's available. And
first of all, Jim's a busy guy. He does see his parents. They've gone to some of his shows. I know I've met them there.
That was one of the things he's talking. I think it was Caroline's or something, that they had to bring Christmas presents to one of Jimmy's shows because that was the only time they were going to see Jimmy for the holidays.
That's Jimmy too. Jimmy's twisted. We know this. We know that. Why is he trying? What you think?
Okay, talking here about Jimmy Norton, I believe.
Think Greg Opie Hughes can paint a picture of Jimmy that's any more twisted than Jimmy has painted of himself? Are you out of your fucking mind? At least he's funny. At least Jimmy's honest and funny. And by the way, I know I was on the other end of that phone call from Jimmy when he said, dude, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. The motherfucker, I can't do it. And I'm like, no, I'm going through the same thing. And
so when Opie and Anthony broke up, well, Anthony got fired. Opie continued the show for 2 years with Jim Norton, and the two just didn't get along.
Jim was like, holy shit, you are? I thought you two were like I thought it was a you two and me thing. I'm like, no, no fucking way. Please don't leave me alone with this asshole. I can't do it. Yeah, that was a key moment in the Anthony-Jimmy relationship.
And look, I'll give it a plug just so people don't think we're making anything up or talking tales out of school. But episode 64, it's part 2 of the two-parter. It's the last 20 minutes where and they wound up cutting him off at the end.
Isn't it weird the episode number is the same as the IQ in the room? It's is that
not nice,
coincidence?
Garrett.
I don't mean your room. I meant Opie's room.
Oh, okay.
Episode 64. Get it? That's called profoundly retarded. So yeah, okay, yeah,
it's there. He laid it all out. So we're not talking.
Poor Anthony Camilla doesn't realize that IQ scores are socially constructed, and that there's no inherent reason that someone with a IQ score of 64, where the normal is 100, is at any way less intelligent than anybody else.
We're not embellishing, we're not making stuff up. This is all reacting to what he said.
He is the worst, man. God, is he terrible.
Power. It seems like a power grab.
It is. It's
all stories of Patrice and Burr and those guys sitting outside for an hour.
You would make them sit out there. Rich Voss, Patrice,
Bobby Kelly, was one of them that was most vocal
and
about
we would just be in there. And for the most part, it was me and Jimmy riffing. We're just hanging out, having a good time.
With a board up.
Yeah, with a board up. And we would be like, yeah, Patrice is out there. And he's like, yeah, no. He kind of takes over the room. I just want to, you want to what? Exercise your power as the guy that could keep him in the hallway? Because you have no...
I remember I used to be a guest a lot on talk radio, and there was this one nationally syndicated radio talk show I went on. He had about 40 stations. He got in trouble. He did some stunt that blocked, I think, the Golden Gate Bridge for like an hour so he could get a haircut. But he enjoyed making me cool my heels. So I would sometimes, first time I went on, he asked me, so why should anyone read your book, A History of X, beyond learning how to masturbate? And I start answering, and he just cuts me off, and that was it. Then they get me back, and I actually have a pretty good conversation with the host for about 20 minutes, but I don't like being kept on hold, and because I don't like it, they keep me on hold, I think, for like close to an hour. I think I did his show 3 times, and then never again.
Other fucking input on the show, but that once Patrice comes in, you're completely out of the fucking mix. Because you don't even have the fucking... You shouldn't even be in the same room with Patrice. Maybe now.
I mean, that's some of the best radio that I've ever heard.
It was
you and Patrice
amazing.
And Norton. I mean...
that was the Man Cow show. So I was on the Man Cow show about 3 times. And yeah, they were suspended. Man Cow was suspended for blocking the busy San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, tiring up commuter traffic for hours. This is a news story from May 27, 1993. And I was on the Man Cow show in 1999 several times.
Amazing.
Shit with Bobo, the up and down game with Bobo, stealing a cab on the street. Like those
were
legendary
huge moments. But he just, I don't know. And the whole thing, like, I guess Bill Burr was doing his show, and he was doing it from a room next to his studio instead of in the studio at Westwood. And Bill's like, what are we doing in here? This is where we're doing it. And I was like, yeah. And I honestly came to the conclusion that I believe this sincerely, knowing this guy for over 20 years. I sincerely believe this. Opie is so petrified of being exposed for what he is, which is a fraud. He's just a fraud. He's not talented. He gets people around him that know how to talk. He's not very smart. He's not compelling when he tells a story. He could spin a record. I know he was able to edit phone call tapes together and things like that back in the old days when he was at BAB. He made a nice little niche for himself doing that. But when it came to full-scale talk radio, he's incompetent at it. He can't do it. So he wants to he goes, yeah, I'm going to mix it up. I'm not doing the same old thing where you go in a studio. I'm going to go to a bar, or I'm going to do this, and we're just going to get a few mics, throw them around and talk. Because he can't then be measured for success or to critique him amongst his peers of people that are in a studio doing a show, a real show.
Yeah.
And as long as he can't be measured by that, he's safe. His insecurities he's safe there. Once he's in a studio, he can be compared to other people.
Yeah.
But the second you try to compare him to Joe Rogan or Corolla or me or anyone else that's doing a show, he'll say, well, you can't even compare it. What I'm doing is totally different.
I'm in a pub.
Right.
I don't have the tools and weapons.
That's the only reason he's doing it like that. Because he's so fucking insecure about his abilities, which goddamn he should be, because he's got none, that he puts on these shows that you can't really compare to anything else. It doesn't make it unique. It's an excuse. so that people can't critique him.
Yeah.
And that is, I swear to you, I know this motherfucker 20 years. That is an absolute. I know that's why he's not doing it from a studio.
You're obsessing again.
I'm so obsessive. So all he does is talk about me. That's all he does.
Okay.
Joe's, delivering those
about
to various stations. I think maybe he thinks lightning can strike twice. Maybe Joe gets himself an Opie, a Greg Opie Hughes, to pick him up. And the motherfucker, you know, I compliment him in the book. I give him all the credit he's due for, you know, discovering a Long Island tin knocker to pull him out of his local radio bullshit.
It's harsh, but it's fair.
It is. It's harsh, but it's fair. That's right.
Yeah, I read all of it. You definitely compliment him and say, dude, I would not be here without
He's the guy that gave me the chance.
Yep.
But motherfucker, 20 years after that, Jesus Christ.
It's just so weird hearing your version and his version. And, like, these guys worked for 20 years together, and nothing adds up on either side. He says that you just blame him for the whole fall of why O&A fell apart. And I was like, everybody had a little bit to do, but everybody else has, you know, admitted their part in it, and except for one person.
Yeah, yeah. No, believe me, I know. I'm no dreamboat to fucking work with for 20 fucking years. I get that. But
it's really hard to stream with people. I mean, I deliberately don't stream with people from my real life almost ever, right? The relationships most important to me, I don't expose them on the show. I don't talk about them on the show. The most precious, holy, sacred, essential parts of my life I don't talk about on the show, because I know when you do a show like this and you start discussing intense topics and you start arguing, people's feelings get hurt. It's very hard to sustain a working relationship with someone when you're doing, you know, edgy, dangerous content on a regular basis. Maybe people who are attracted to marginalized ideas are predominantly marginalized people who, by definition, are not particularly socially skilled and who are volatile, high in neuroticism, low in agreeableness. All right, someone who's willing to tackle edgy, marginalized ideas that are not socially acceptable. Right, but by almost definition, it's going to be someone who's low in agreeableness and probably high in neuroticism, and someone who's probably socially isolated, and then he's socially isolated in large part because he lacks many social skills and social disciplines. And then the more socially isolated he gets, the more he naturally attunes to conspiracy theories, to saying more and more unpopular, shocking things. He tries to prove his worth to, fellow dissidents by torching bridges to polite society. You know, everything's a spiral. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, like one good deed leads to another good deed. One pro-social act leads to another pro-social act. You know, one act of kindness leads to another act of kindness. One antisocial act very quickly leads to another antisocial act. You get a shame spiral. You get an antisocial spiral. You get a self-destruction spiral. And no wonder that people who are particularly attuned to self-destruction, to social destruction, who struggle with an inability to maintain relationships, people who are socially isolated, don't tend to work too well together. All right, normal people don't host radio shows or do a lot of live streams.
Bottom line is, me and Jim Norton still work together, and we're still fucking unbelievable friends. And we worked together almost as long, aside from the Boston days and maybe the first year of NEW, we worked together for 15 years, was it? So it wasn't, you know, we were able to deal with each other's bullshit and little foibles. Travis, the great Travis Teft, and you and Sam Roberts, like everyone else that works there, they come to my house for Christmas. You know, it's like that Garrett is here working at Compound Media. These are all people that we hung out with, did shows with, worked with, but also had a great relationship and very friendly. Some of those fucking times back in that office at NEW when the show was over and we would stay for hours just drinking, smoking, playing video games, and laughing our asses off at God knows what. I don't remember, but it was funny shit.
Yeah,
it was like on the edge of something. Yeah, it was just,
we were just like the outlaws, kind of. It was this new wave coming across.
Yeah,
that was totally different than anything else. Yeah,
yeah, it was just really fun. And you know, it's 2018, and I still know these people. And I know, look, I'm not sitting there like I'm Mr. Saint. I know throughout the years I've been a pain in the ass at certain junctures, but like we get over those things. And it was never because no one called me or fucking send me a wedding gift.
It sounds like grudges were held too.
Yeah, that's
just
what
the
it was.
thing
There was a lot
that
of
guys
resentment.
don't usually do. It's like, you fucked me on that one, bro, and then you get over it, you go have a couple beers, and it's legit gone.
Exactly.
The power dynamic of from my perspective, reading stuff about wanting to sign a 1-year deal, which doesn't sound like much to people listening, but it's like when you've got a whole crew of Erocks and Sams and guys back there that work their asses off day in and day out every day for you, they're not paid huge money. They're counting on a 45-year deal. Like,
they want to know.
Relax. I can get married. I can have a kid.
I could buy a house. I could do something.
Stability.
You don't let people go year to year because you have this power thing. Like, you're holding it over everyone's head that you're the guy that's making it so you can't fucking buy a house right now or a car or decide to have a kid because you don't know in a year if you're going to be making that same amount of money.
Right.
But if you sign a 3-year deal, that's a pretty good buffer for someone that wants to start something in their life. That motherfucker would never do it. I swear, I would go to Bob Eatman and say, a banana, ma baba, God bless. I would go to Bob and go, I'll sign a fucking 10-year deal. I don't give a shit. First of all, if they want to fire you, they'll fire you anyway. So it doesn't even matter what the fuck that is. But if you sit there and earn your money, they'll pay you for 10 fucking years.
Yep.
And who gives a shit? Like, what did Greg Opie Hughes think that after a year, fucking K-Rock in L.A. was going to come ringing for Greg Opie Hughes' unbelievable talent? To go off to L.A.? Thank God I only signed a 1-year deal, because now I'm getting millions to replace fucking, Carson Daly somewhere, or I don't know. He's such a delusional douche.
The guy making that call, I don't know. I've never met Opie, but you can see, like, that guy's set. He doesn't have to worry about it. His future's set.
Exactly. He
It's
doesn't
very
have
easy
to worry
take,
about it.
Take that on and be like, no.
Everyone else did.
But everyone else does.
I felt so bad. I would apologize to everybody. Like, I'm sorry, man. We want this done. Because you guys didn't know what the fuck was next. Like,
okay, so to the extent that I'm aware of this controversy between Opie and Anthony, it does seem like Anthony has a stronger argument to make. Right, that's going to do it for now. Shabbat shalom. Bye.